Hello and welcome. My name's Nat. I'm from Somerset Spiders, and I'm joined today with Tarantula Leah. We're briefly talking off screen about
Yes.
money, weren't we? About how much we spend
Yes.
on our creatures. And I suppose, whilst we've got you, Leah, a really good topic would be to think about how much spiders cost in the USA.
Right, because it's a little different between the US and the UK. Um, but yeah, spiders. I mean, for the more common tarantulas, you're probably going to pay about 40 to $60 for the more common ones, and then
Mhm.
as their rarity progresses, so does their expensivity, if you will. I made that up. Um, but yeah, they get a little more expensive the more rare the tarantula is. Like right now, I believe the Typhoclena celadonia is really common in the UK. From what
Okay.
I hear, it's pretty common. So you guys don't pay a whole lot of money for them. But here, they're not quite as common, and they're super, super sought after. So they cost about 200 to 300. I know um, about a year and a half ago, they were close to 600 for one spiderling.
Yeah,
So,
so they were very expensive over here in the UK.
yeah.
Um, just trying to stop my face from being all washed out. They were very expensive here in the UK, and they are still really sought after. The T.
Yeah.
Celadonias. We have one of our companies that we order from in the UK called the Spider Shop. They put a
Yeah.
post up the other day.
Uh-huh.
They had some in stock, and as soon as people went to go and click on it, they'd sold out already.
Right.
So
Within
they,
days. Yeah.
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 So Shady's in the chat, and she's just been to Ham, which is one of the biggest tarantula and invert shows in Germany.
Right.
And it looks like there was slings there for 60 to 80 euros for the T.
Okay. So
Celadonias.
that's close to like 80 or 90 in US, I believe. Oh
Roughly.
no, we're not
No.
talking euros. My bad. Or
Yeah.
pounds.
Yeah.
My
Oh,
mistake.
no. So Shady is euros.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, no, it would be, I don't know what, like $150, something like that.
Right.
If it
Oh
would
wow.
if you were to transfer euros over. I can't remember what the exchange rate is. I've probably got that wrong.
Right. No, I think you're
But
absolutely
it's
right.
but I think the biggest battle for yourselves in the States is that the spiders are generally bred in Europe.
Yes.
So
Some of them.
then they have to be then shipped over to the States. That's where that
Right.
money's going, right? And then your import tax and
Right. Right. Well,
and
especially with the more rare species, I know quite a few like local breeders. It's just that the demand right now in the States is way more than what our local breeders can actually keep up with. And so that's why we have been kind of relying on the European market to import those species and kind of hopefully like fulfill that demand.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
tricky.
it is tricky, and when you think about the other side of the hobby for you guys over there, when you start thinking about transferring spider from state to state
Hmm.
and all of the things that go there, so if
Yeah.
you breed a specific species, let's think about the Pokelotharia.
Right.
So
Right.
you could breed some in one state, you could breed
Hmm.
some Metallicas, however you can only sell them to people in the state. So if they have all
Right.
you, it might stop you from wanting to breed them because if you can only in some states if you can only sell them in your state, you might end up with 200-300
The
spiders,
tarantula. Yeah. Yeah.
tarantulas,
Right. Like a whole bunch of
like in your
babies.
house, just sort of I've just got
Yeah.
loads of them. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's definitely part of the problem. I mean, I understand the restrictions behind that because Poecilotheria right now they're critically endangered. They're really losing their natural habitats, so that's kind of why they put those protections. But I agree with you. I think it really kind of hurts the local breeders more than anything, unless you're traveling like with a show, like a reptile show or an exotic show, I believe that there's a little bit of like loopholes and leeway through that because I have bought Poecilotheria species from expos.
Yeah,
So yeah, I don't know how they get through that, but I know that there are quite a few species that are definitely on that restricted, like have to be within state to sell them or buy them or whatever. So,
absolutely. It's just a lot, isn't it? It's a
yeah,
lot to sort of get your head around, and restrictions and everything
right.
like that. So, Leah, what do you think is your experience of the most offensive tarantula that you've come across?
I would
Maybe in your collection, or
currently in my collection, I would say my most defensive tarantula would probably be my Nandus, like the
I think.
Nandu, yeah, the Nandu colorata villosus, very defensive tarantula, kicks hairs all the time. Like I move a little bit, she'll kick hairs. Um, you know, but as far as like overall in the hobby, I do believe the Cereopithecus minax is definitely the most defensive. They, it's funny because if you give them what they need, so like a Cereopithecus minax, they're a fossorial species, so they prefer to burrow underground, and that's pretty much where they'll stay.
Yeah,
So if you give them plenty of dirt and space to burrow and whatnot, you'll never see it, but you also won't get that defensive behavior
yeah,
because it won't feel the need it won't feel threatened. It won't feel, backed into a corner, if you will. Um, so I had a Cereopithecus minax. She was a 8-year-old girl, and that's actually pretty old for captive bred. Well,
okay,
maybe not. No, she was pretty old.
yeah,
Like I got her from a friend, and he had her for 7 or 8 years. And so when I got her, she was an old lady, but she was still spicy. Like I rehoused her, and the moment that I got her out of her burrow, she was just threat pose and slapping the ground. She was very, very defensive. So
yeah. I think you're really right about the. So if you have a fossorial species, so what lots of people do for some reason, and I think it's what they've maybe seen or in videos and other people's setups. But there's also this conversation around, oh, you want to see your spider. So what they do is
right.
they provide less substrate. They provide less of what that spider wants. Now you don't need to put 3 foot of substrate in,
No,
but you need to get me the spider needs to feel secure. And
right.
Tom Moran talks about this quite a lot around the idea
Yes.
of giving it what it needs so it thrives.
Hmm.
And sorry, I was just reading Shady's comment. So yeah, giving what it needs so it thrives and so it can feel secure is is
Absolutely.
is really important. We really want to see our spiders,
Oh
but
yeah.
having a pet hole's kind of okay.
I think it's pretty cool and okay because I have a few fossorials. I currently have I believe it's called a Kilobrachys species Kane Krishan, or
Yeah,
the smoky earth tiger. Um, Beautiful tarantula, absolutely gorgeous, but I never really see her. But I am fascinated with her only because her burrow and the turret that she has made like around her burrow is really, really something.
yeah.
And the way that they web around the tunnels that they dig is really, really fascinating. It really kind of
It's
holds everything together.
it's like a volcano kind
Yeah,
of thing, isn't it? Where it comes out. Yeah,
yeah, definitely. She's over here. Let me pull her out real quick. She's not in a huge enclosure. That's the funny thing is I have here in the States we have like herp cult and tarantula cribs. I think they're working on getting over into the UK. I'm not sure if they are yet.
yeah,
Um, but these, good enclosures. But as you can see, this one, it's about like, I'd say this about, I think this is 10 inches, maybe 12 inches, but she is really happy in here. Like,
yeah,
I know there's a lot of reflection, but you can see that like this right here is her turret and her burrow. And every now and then I'll throw a flashlight right here, and you can kind of see her body in there. So
Yeah.
she has burrowed pretty deeply, but she's happy. She doesn't throw threat poses. She's not. I never see her unless I'm out at like 2 a.m. and I, catch a glimpse of her just hanging out. But for the most part, this is what I see.
I think Shady's actually put a comment in there, so I'll just I'm getting used to StreamYard, so
Yeah.
I'm not as good as Wesley. So so she actually keeps her room pretty dark, so hers doesn't dig a
Yeah.
hole and is always on top.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah.
It's about whether you can, isn't it? Whether you can keep it.
Huh. I mean, if it's
Oh, we have lost Leah, but hopefully she will come back. So yeah, so as we were talking, and just let me add you to. There we are.
so sorry about that. I
That's
pushed
okay.
the wrong button. I'm sorry. You were saying that she keeps her room very dark.
Yeah, so she keeps her room very dark, but she's also gone on to say that the downside is when you open the lid, she always feels threatened. So
Oh yeah.
and that's the kind of thing, isn't it? Where you can't have the best of both worlds. But I think what I've done as well is I've definitely noticed that I've adapted my own sleeping pattern.
Oh,
So like maybe like I tend to go to bed later now just because I've got so many spiders,
sure.
and I spend some time just sort of like looking at them and doing it and noticing when they come out
Hmm.
around 9-10 o'clock. It's sort of to observe them and
Yes.
what they're doing is actually a really nice part of the
Yeah.
hobby.
Oh, definitely. I agree. If you're staying up kind of late, that's party time for the tarantulas. Honestly, like it's really cool to come out in those late evening hours, to observe their behaviors, because most of the time you're going to see them doing some web making, pushing dirt around. I know, especially with the fossorials, that's how they make those turrets. Is they dig all that dirt up and then they like throw it out of the burrow. So I
Well,
do. I mean, oh, go right ahead. Sorry.
no. Oh, I was just going to say, no, I fully agree. I've just
Yeah.
rehoused, I've just rehoused 2 curly hairs.
Oh,
So
cool. Yeah.
yesterday, and I made a lovely setup for them,
Nice.
and yeah, they're just bulldozing it now.
Yeah. Right. I mean,
So
that's.
digging it up, and one of the reasons why I've upgraded them is they were in. I don't know whether I'll just see if I can grab one.
Sure. Sure. I know
So
I've got a couple curlies that I need to
yeah,
rehouse as well.
we have these pots for some slings in the
Oh
UK.
yeah.
I don't know if you've come across them. I think are they
Oh yeah.
new in the States or
No, we
because
love those. I
yeah,
keep like smaller if I get slings and stuff. Those are really great for
yeah.
for slings.
So but reading up on it,
Mm,
and doing further research, which I think is always really important, is
mhm.
understanding that the Tillicotyle alba pilosum, I
Yeah.
think that's right. Yep,
Yes,
they do actually like to burrow. They're
they
not an
do.
obligated burrower, but if you give them that opportunity, they will.
They will. Yeah.
So I'm going to disappear again for a second.
No worries. I've got my curly right here. And this is one of my girls that definitely needs a rehouse.
So the one thing I'm really worried about. Oh, look at that! The one thing
Yeah.
that I dislike about the UK is we can't get those Amex boxes.
Oh no. Because the Amex, the Amex boxes are really great. The Amex,
Yeah,
um, I do
but
like them. I use them a lot.
we have. I did manage to get some on Amazon.
Oh,
So
good.
there's
Nice.
that it's not an Amex box, but it's the same sort of concept. But just by giving it that, I got too many lights. Giving it that 3 inch, like 2.5, 3 inches of
Right.
substrate, the ability for it to burrow, it was really interesting this morning to wake up and see that they had redecorated. They'd moved the moss around, everything, and filled up the water as they
I
tend
love
to
that.
do.
I always love that. It's funny to watch them do that because you think that you're setting up a really great enclosure. You've got all these good anchor points, cute little flowers, and then 3 days later you're looking at your, Grandma stole a polka or whoever, and there's just flowers just torn apart and covered in dirt, and you're like, what did you do?
Yeah, like I spent lots of time making it look pretty,
Right.
and but that's part of it. It's
Definitely.
nice to set it all up. I've definitely learned a lot from watching Petco at the Dark Den and
Love Petco.
other people, and they're just sort of what I really like about their stuff is they'll show it 3 weeks afterwards and go, look at all this soil it's kicked out, or it just sort of gives you that idea. I'm just going to put a quick message into the podcast group to see.
No problem.
Anything else? How many curly hairs do you have?
I have 3 little cuddle elbow pilos. Yeah, so I have 3 curly hairs. And they're all mostly like juvenile. They're coming up on sub-adult size. So I don't have any slings of them, but they're wonderful. I have here in the States, I don't know why, but there's the Honduras one, and then there's the Nicaraguan. And I believe they consider the Honduras the hobby form.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure like where all those terminologies come from, because I know that Honduras and Nicaragua are pretty close, I would say. Well, I might have to look at a map, but I'm pretty sure like geographically they're pretty similar regions. So it's kind of interesting, like, because when I'm looking at them, I don't really see a whole lot of difference between the 2 species. And I believe they're all kind of categorized in the same species, so it's really strange.
Yeah, I think there was I believe there was a discussion around where they maybe bred with another tarantula, the Honduras ones, that weren't true form. Which weren't, so they're very, very, very similar. They're the same genus, but not the same species. And I think that's where they think that it's come from. Whereas the Nicaraguan is supposed to be the pure curly hair.
The pure bloodline. Okay.
And that is, I think that is one of the really big things within the hobby that lots of people don't know, is that unlike snake breeders who are trying to get different forms and different morphs, you're trying to keep it within the same thing. So if you could breed the Nicaraguan type, that's favored in the hobby. But that I think I was reading an article, I can't remember who it was by, but I'll stick something in the comments later.
Sure.
They are trying to stop the Honduras genus from.
Oh wow!
The people in the hobby would like to stop it, like the hardcore.
Sure. Oh, I can see that.
Owners, which makes total sense.
I agree, though. The hybridization of certain species and stuff is really a negative thing in the hobby. It's definitely very looked down on. It's very frowned on. I know. I believe there was a couple of Brachypelma species that unfortunately had that happen. I believe it's Baumgarteni. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Or the Amelia. Because I think that there was, the Brachypelma hamori and the Baumgarteni, those 2, somebody somewhere hybridized them, and that's how we got the Brachypelma Amelia. And it's just as far as like conservation, and keeping the species bloodlines, clean, if you will, then that actually is a benefit to the hobby, because then it helps to keep those species alive and around and in their purest form. I think in the wild, if there's hybridization happening, then
that happens.
Right. That's just natural. That's.
I think if if we're making it happen, that's the
That's the problem.
problem, isn't it?
Right.
So, what seeing as it's a Somerset Spiders and a Tarantula Leah show by the looks of it
Yeah.
today, what got you into the hobby, Leah?
Oh, I actually was terrified of arachnids and spiders before. I used to be like so petrified. I would scream and run and just be super scared of them. And I there's a beautiful, wonderful place here in Colorado called the Butterfly Pavilion.
Yeah.
And at this wonderful place, they have a Grammostola rosea and porteris that they actually use as animal ambassadors. And so you can go and they say, hold Rosie. So you go and you can hold Rosie. And I mean, when I first went, it was just, they allowed her to just kind of do. And that's kind of what started it. It was fascinating for me because it was wild that you can barely feel their feet, but you can feel their weight. And it's almost
Yeah.
like, what is that? And so that's kind of where the fascination started. And then from there, I was at a Curiosities and Oddities Expo, where this wonderful lady had a pink toe tarantula, and she had bonded with this tarantula so well that it trusted her completely. Like it would just crawl on her, and she just allowed it. And I just was like, wait a minute, they actually are like animals. They have thoughts and feelings like cats and dogs do. And this is also kind of a topic of contention in the hobby. I think,
It is, yeah.
yeah. So a lot of people don't really believe that tarantulas can or have that kind of emotions or whatnot. And I think to an extent that that's true. But I do think that they have a consciousness, and I do think that they do have emotions. Maybe not quite as expansive as a human or a dog, but they're there.
Well, if we think about it in a sense of those basic emotions, when a tarantula does a threat pose,
Mm,
it's scared, isn't it? So
right,
being scared is an emotion. So if
absolutely.
we're thinking about that, so what was your first tarantula then? After
Uh, Avicularia vicularia. I had a pink toe tarantula. Named her Django Fett.
brilliant,
Right. I
yeah.
have yeah, most of my tarantulas are named after Star Wars characters. Um, just because I'm kind of a Star Wars nut. But yeah, so I started with the pink toe tarantula, Costa Rican pink toe. Um, and I loved her. And then it just kind of grew from there. I think after that I got the GBB.
Yep.
And then I moved to, the Carabina Versicolor. I
So
lost.
there's a bit of a hint here about like the bright colors maybe are very
Yeah,
attractive. You found that quite attractive at the beginning.
yes, I did. I did because I actually had no idea that tarantulas were so colorful until
Mm.
like I got the AVIC, and then I started doing much more research into different species and where they come from and all those things, and I started to discover that there are so many blue tarantulas that it's hard to ignore those beautiful colors. So yeah, that's definitely, and I think that's something that a lot of like new tarantula keepers these days are really into that because of the colors,
Yeah.
those beautiful vibrancy.
I think that the colors they really help
Yeah,
break down the stigma
I
because
agree.
people think big black scary tarantula or brown.
Right.
You think about the sturmy, the tea sturmy, or
Yeah,
something along those lines.
like
And
a
uh,
Fauna Pelma Calcodes or the Arizona
yeah,
blondes. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And I am with Shady. I also like the brown ones. I
Me
think
too.
I think they're beautiful in their own little way.
They
But
are.
when I have people ask me why do you keep these animals, and it's like, well, actually, they're like, oh, I would really hate to have them in my home and things like that. And then you show them the
Yeah.
pictures of the really nice, vibrant ones. They're like, what?
Right.
They actually come like this? And then you maybe drop in a T Saladonia picture,
Right.
and they're like, wow, amazing.
Right.
Um,
I think that's one of my favorite like bragging points for people who aren't tarantula keepers who ask me like, why do you keep these tarantulas? What's the point of it? For me, it's a couple of different things. It's conservation, it's education, but also for me, like mental health. These guys, they keep me grounded, so I
yeah.
have a tendency to kind of drift off. And when I'm taking care and feeding my tarantulas or rehousing a tarantula, it really, really helps to keep me in the moment
Mhm.
because, if you're not in the moment and you're not paying attention to those, the body language that the tarantulas they're gonna show you, um, then, you're gonna get bit or worse. Um, well, or your tarantula is gonna die. So being in the moment and being grounded is really a big part of it for me, just
Yeah.
mental health wise. Um, but yeah, the colors, like that's for sure the my favorite bragging point because I have a Zenesis intermedia,
Oh, lovely.
or the Colombian, I believe it's called Colombian Lesserback. Yeah, or no, Amazonian blue bloom, I believe is what it's called. Big beautiful spider, but that pink starburst on the carapace is really eye catching. And so, anytime I show anybody that species, they're kind of like, "What? That's amazing!" It's like, yeah, there's a
Yeah.
whole world you're not even aware of. So,
Yeah. I think for me, people think I'm just sat in my little dark room with just one little tarantula or whatever. But I agree with almost everything you're saying. Really,
thank
for
you.
me, I think having them to look after is really nice. I like to call myself a caretaker, opposed to
Yes,
I'm just taking care of them. That's all
right.
I'm doing. And today, for instance, I'm having a bit of an issue with a Balfouri that's decided to
Uh oh.
started to like curl under,
Uh oh.
whereas it's others in the communal are okay. I spotted it last night and like something's not quite right. It's not moving right. And
Uh
then
oh.
today, but it was a focus. Today's been a really good focus.
Yes.
So I've upgraded their enclosure very
Yeah.
quickly into a temporary one, giving it more ventilation, all
Right.
of those sorts of things. And just through that process, it was really nice. Even when I was chasing one that was crawling under the table because it got out. And they're only slings. They're small juveniles. But even though
Cool.
it's a bit of a sad thing that's going on,
Sure.
it's still a really good focus. And also I've definitely noticed that my mental health has improved
Right. Yeah.
from keeping them. I'm actually a mental health worker, so I
Oh,
support people
wow.
with their mental health, and I'm training to become a mental health nurse. But that doesn't mean that we don't have our own mental health.
Right.
And yeah, the focus is there, and I think if anything, the focus has been a bit too much on the spiders, and I'm sort of not doing other things. But now it's
Yeah.
sort of getting back into it and doing it. And
Sure.
but like you say, being in the moment, being able to focus on something is
Yes.
really good. The reason why I got into the hobby,
Uh-huh.
a bit of an odd reason. So I ended up getting a hognose snake,
Okay.
and I was like, that was really nice. And Betty, she's lovely. Um,
Yes.
and so I've had her for about a year, and but after about a month of having her, I was like, I really like this. And I remember it sort of brought back memories as a child where I was like, oh, I'd really like to have a zoo and all of
Right.
these kinds of things. And I was just
Mm.
scrolling through. I was watching Snake Discovery.
Oh, I
That's
love
what I was
Snake
doing.
is good.
I was
Yes.
watching Snake Discovery, and it did like this automatic play thing, and Petco came up.
Yeah.
So doing
Yeah.
that. And then the next video was the Tarantula Collective. I'm like, oh, okay. And then they were
Yep.
talking about ordering them, and I think it might have been 2 a.m. in the morning, something silly like that.
Sure.
And I was like, what? You can order tarantulas? And I thought, well, why not? And I ordered one, and it arrived, and I was terrified for a week, 2 weeks, but I was more terrified that I was going to kill it. I think
Right.
is like that real concern.
Right.
So, but then like that development and sort of seeing and then witnessing the first molt
Right.
of the tarantula. I actually got to witness it happening. Luckily, Tarantula Collective, Petco, everyone has been like, if they're on the back, don't worry about it.
Right.
So
Don't,
already
you know,
prepared for that. And
absolutely.
then just to see that miracle, I was like, I was hooked.
It's incredible. It really is. And it sounds like your progression was a lot like mine. I believe mine was a little different. I went,
Yeah,
Tarantula Collective and then Petco in the Dark Den, and Tom Moran. I'm a
Tom,
big fan of Tom.
Tom, he's got a special place.
He really, he is the husbandry god. I will tell
Yeah,
you that because I do use his methods. The reason I do is because he's not very far from me. He's over in, I believe, Missouri.
yeah,
But Colorado here, I mean, we're at a pretty high altitude, so humidity and moisture here is almost non-existent. But we have fluctuations, obviously, like most places do, but because of the altitude, the air is quite a bit thinner. So the humidity just doesn't stick around quite as well as like, sea level. So Tom Moran, I actually lost a couple of spiders because of the humidity issues. And so I really got into Tom Moran, and I started using his methods as, he says just to wet down a corner real good and then kind of let it dry. I'm a little tiny bit different just because Colorado. So most of the time the moisture will dry up here within 4 to 5 days.
okay.
So I moisturize pretty much every week. Just when I'm feeding, I put in moisture. I'll wet down a corner or so, and sometimes I'll put a little extra just because it is so darn dry here. People who move to Colorado, it's kind of funny. A lot of people have bloody noses because of the altitude, because of the dryness. And they get kind of confused. They're like, why am I having this? And this is the climate. Hello.
Yeah, and it does have a real big effect. So for
Yeah.
me, I was keeping on cocoa soil,
Okay,
cocoa
yeah.
fiber. So and I'm trying to quit
Yeah.
cocoa fiber because I don't find it holds the moisture enough. But whereas when we have I'm not sure whether you have it over there, but we've got Spider Life, which is a bit of a substrate mix.
Oh yeah. Okay.
A mix up, which is really nice. And in the UK, I'm in the southwest as well.
Okay.
It's quite moist. There's
Right.
my humidity in my flat. It'll be different for other people, but at the moment,
Sure.
my humidity sits at around 40 to 50%, and
That's wonderful.
it's just we don't have to do. I don't have to do as much.
Right.
Of
You
moistening
don't you
down,
probably
but
don't have that
yeah,
maintenance you're not having to do quite as
no.
often for
But
you know
it's definitely keeping on top of it though.
yes.
It's sort of
Yes.
making sure there's a water bowl, making sure that's filled.
Right.
But, I do follow what Tom Moran says about watering down one corner and giving it the opportunity and things.
Hmm.
So, and I have to say, I love watching him on not
Oh,
watching him, watching him. I love watching him, but also I'm getting the bus at the moment, commuting,
yeah.
and so I just listen to his podcasts.
Yeah, he has a wonderful podcast.
Yeah.
He's actually, I mean, he's a genius. I don't know how he comes up with topics every week, but he is fantastic. Highly recommend his podcast, absolutely. Yeah, I use I believe I use Exoterra Reptisoil.
Yeah, it's near enough the
Um,
same thing, isn't it?
yeah, I use the jungle mix. I find that one's really nice because it's got little bits of charcoal, little bits of sphagnum moss, and then of course the dirt and whatnot. And it comes kind of moisture. But I find that with like my Nandu chromatis, the Colorado villosus, and the Trepepe, they seem to not really like moisture quite as much.
No,
So
no, no.
right. I mean, I think they come from a pretty like scrubland kind of terrain in Brazil. I know that the Trepepe comes from like right on the border of Brazil and Argentina, so I know that that's a very kind of deserty
Yeah, it's
scrubland.
kind of like savanna scrubland, isn't it? So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So I wonder for you, do you keep Aphonopelmas at all, like the Aphonopelma caucodes, euthalatum?
No, I haven't got. Oh no, yes. What am I on about? Yeah, I was
Cool.
thinking about a totally different genus of spider.
Oh,
Yeah, I've got one Chalcodes.
oh, nice.
So I keep it relatively dry, though
Yeah.
I water down a corner.
Oh, sure.
It's currently at the moment it's decided to borrow, so which says
Yeah.
to me it's looking for moisture. So
Or-
but lovely, it dug its burrow at the back and then brought it
uh,
to the front, so I can always see it, which is really nice. And I
right.
have got two Samani,
Oh,
Farnapalma
yeah.
Samani. I don't know if you've got those. The
I have one.
Costa Rican zebra or the white
Yeah,
belly.
the zebra. Yeah, the Costa Rican zebra stripe.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have one, and mine is a juvenile, about the size of a U.S. nickel.
yeah.
Um,
Nice
so
slow growers.
yeah, very slow growth. I've had her for at least a year now, and she has grown very little. So yeah, Aphonopelmas, Brachypelmas, Grammostolas, they're definitely known for being those slow growers. Um, but yeah, I've found that my Aphonopelmas are pretty content with how things are.
Yeah,
If I don't add a whole lot of moisture and stuff, they seem to really appreciate that. The Nandus, it's funny because I always find my Nandus like on the wall of their enclosure, just kind of. I'm like, oh, too much moisture. Okay,
yeah.
you know,
That's a really that's actually a really good tip, isn't it? What to look out
yeah,
for if
yes,
your spider's getting away from the soil, it's too wet.
it's probably too moist.
Probably
Yep,
too moist. There are provisos in there, so like if you've just rehoused something, it's going to
it's gonna
be
do that.
yeah,
Yeah, just
yeah,
because they got to get adjusted to their new home and whatnot. But yeah, no, I love my tarantulas. I just love
yeah.
them. I really love Aphonopelmas. I'm a nut for them. I believe my logo is actually an Aphonopelma caucodes.
Just
Um,
going a quick little look.
yeah,
I think
no, by all means,
I actually think it is, isn't it?
it is.
Uh,
It's an Aphonopelma caucodes. So little Arizona blonde, but they are some of my favorite tarantulas. Just because the browns are
oh,
so diverse and unique on them. Like I never thought there were so many shades of brown until I saw Aphonopelmas.
have
So,
you got any tips about keeping a fun of palmas?
oh,
Is there anything that you've learned that you're like, oh, I've learned this and I should really share this? Or
yes. I found that a lot of the new, I would say most of the new worlds are kind of like this. I found that male tarantulas tend not to burrow quite as much. So, like, if you have a terrestrial species that they're kind of opportunistic burrowers, or sometimes they're obligate burrowers. But I've noticed that the males, they tend to grow a little faster. And they don't burrow quite as much. At least that's my suspicion.
Mhm.
Um, Females tend to burrow. Also, a faunopelma, they teach me patience.
Oh, yeah,
Patience, patience, patience. These guys, they sometimes they eat, sometimes they don't. I mean, right now, my Calcodes, she has eaten once this month, once. So, so they teach us patience, I think. So I think that's the biggest thing for faunopelmas is just have patience. Don't push them because they're just doing their thing. They're as long as they're hanging out and walking around and whatnot, they're fine.
yeah.
Um,
My Ophana palma, I think it's eaten once in about 2 months.
Yeah.
and the time that it did eat,
Yeah.
I noticed that it was out on top.
Right.
So, and I'm like,
Like
okay,
waiting.
so it's out looking.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
opened the lid and it scurried back down to into its little hide that it's made,
Sure.
and I dropped a dubia down there, and yeah, it took it straight away, and then
Good.
it was a nice size roach it had, so
Yeah.
its booty, its abdomen is a nice size, so I'm not overly worried, but. It's such a
Good.
beautiful spider. I'm like, oh, it's made a burrow, so I don't get to see it that much. But when I do,
Right.
wow,
Oh, they
what a beautiful.
are. Yeah, they're absolutely stunning. They really are. And the males are quite a bit darker than the females, which can be kind of confusing for some people. So definitely, that's something to be aware of. But yeah, Aphonopelmas are definitely that one species or that one genus for me that was like teaching me lots and lots of patience. And I'm not the most patient person in the world. Like, you know what I mean? I love
Yeah,
old worlds for that reason. Like they are spicy and fun and they will eat right away. Um but Aphonopelmas are they're gonna show you. You're
yeah.
gonna learn today.
Yeah, no, most definitely, and I think something that I've definitely picked up on through my short time of keeping spiders, especially
Huh.
on the Aphonopalma. So they molt, they have beautiful colors,
Oh yeah.
but as soon as they start going a little bit foggy, is the only way I can say it. Like the color starts to saturate. They may
Yeah.
not even look like they're in pre-molt, so their abdomen may
Yeah.
not be shining or anything like that, but
Right.
when they start to fade a little bit, you
Uh-huh.
know that you might be waiting another 6 months to a year
Yeah.
before they molt, but you know that their appetite is slowing down, and that's
Yeah.
something that I've really learned with these lovely ones. And I've got two.
Oh cool.
I got two Samani, which are lovely. So one of them came in, and my Calcodes as well. So my
Mhm.
one of my Calcodes and one of my Samani came in a thing from a show that we. So you have like mystery boxes
Yeah.
at the shows, which are lovely. And the Spider Shop in the UK, they do one called the Gimp Box, which
Oh cool.
is spiders missing limbs, which is really
Oh,
really
okay.
nice. So my Calcodes wasn't missing any limbs, but it had regenerated two legs, and they're very small.
Right.
And my Samani was missing a leg,
Mhm.
but my Samani's now molted, and it's got a little appendage, and it's using it, so it's moving around, which is really nice.
That's
Uh,
lovely. That's good.
and like you said, it's about that patience. But I'm like, I really need them both to molt again, because
Right.
you want to see them with
All 8.
all 8 legs
Yeah.
and all at the right size. But
Right.
that's another thing that just amazes me with keeping tarantulas
Mm.
is like their ability to adapt and change.
I mean, they are really incredible on that aspect. Absolutely. Michael Codes, she has changed her enclosure at least 3 times this last year. She's just torn things up and thrown them around, and um, but I think you're correct. You're absolutely right about that. They are very adaptable. Um, and very forgiving. I think a Faunopelma is one of those genus that they're very hardy and they're very forgiving. As far as like husbandry mistakes and stuff like that, you're not going to lose the spider over, oh, I didn't put enough substrate in.
Yeah,
Well, that's okay. They'll find a way, you
yeah,
know. Whereas like a Xenethus intermedia, they're not going to be quite as forgiving. Oh, sorry, Momo. But they're that's my dog,
yeah,
but they're not going to be quite as forgiving, so your husbandry has to be a little more on point for them because they are very moisture dependent. So if they lose that moisture, then you can really lose that tarantula. I believe same with the Tyrannopelma sazami or the Brazilian blue. Beautiful species, absolutely, but if that moisture isn't, if they don't have, I believe at least like 60-70% humidity, that can be very detrimental for that tarantula.
yeah, yeah. And it's think when we So this would be a really good topic to talk about, especially
Yeah.
as we are starting to get into like the hot weather in the UK.
Right?
So and our humidity is a lot different to where you are.
Yes.
So it's thinking about humidity, and I I think at the very beginning when I kept spiders, I was like, oh, you'd have to spray it down and doing this
Yeah.
and doing that. But the thing that I've actually learned is no, you don't. So to have humidity, you can just put a water dish in there and make
Right.
sure it's okay and do a corner.
Hmm.
The worry is that you make it into a quagmire first of all, but
Right.
also if you're keeping your slings, so you get your little slings first of all, and you have your little
Yep.
sling pot.
Yep.
That's my Machala sling pot. Um,
Nice.
so there's nowhere for that humidity to go out, and
Right.
the a really good way to think about it for anyone that's keeping slings, especially that way, is you wouldn't be able to sit in a sauna
Uh,
all day, every day, and breathe. It's
right. You'd eventually you'd pass out.
yeah. How do you keep humidity correct in yours? Is it like what we've discussed already, or is there anything that
It's
you?
similar. Yeah,
Yeah,
for slings, I will do just a little spray, like a couple of drops of water just
yeah,
on the side of the vial, once every week. And
yeah.
then,
Because also with slings, we need to be aware that slings don't have that waxy protective coating either. That
right,
so
right,
they can
right.
actually absorb a lot through their exoskeleton in their first
Yeah.
couple of instars, I believe.
No, I believe you're correct. Yeah, definitely. Slings are a lot more fragile than, a juvenile and subadult or adult tarantulas. They're definitely, you have to be pretty careful with that humidity because if you do it too much, then they will just liquefy. If you
Yeah,
do it too little, then um, they're not going to thrive quite as well. But I found that if just a couple of little drops on the side of the vial tends
yeah.
to work really well, no matter the species. Um,
And you
I
can use an
have
eyedropper, can't you? You can use an eyedropper, or you can
Oh
dip
yeah,
your a paintbrush in and dab it on
right,
the
just
side.
doop doop, yeah,
Yep,
definitely. Sphagnum moss. I found that if you use a little bit of sphagnum moss or like the New Zealand
yeah,
sphagnum moss, I found that that stuff is really great. If you just put a little moisture in that, it'll hold it forever. Um, well, maybe not forever, but
yeah,
a pretty long while. So that really helps. And then you're not like oversaturating your sling,
yeah,
which is really great, especially with those tiny little dwarf guys. I have two dwarf slings right now. I have a Nishinokinus species Panama. I believe that's how it's pronounced.
mhm,
But they're called the Panamanian banded dwarf.
yeah,
And the slings for these guys are just unbelievably tiny. So, keeping them in a vial is obviously like the best bet for them because then you'll be able to keep track of them and know when they're eating and whatnot. But even still, even in the tiny little vial, they're so hard. So yeah, I found that just a couple little drops of water is plenty. Just once a week, slings can be very unforgiving.
yes,
Uh, so definitely not like the most beginner of keeping, if you will, like tiny slings. So I always recommend for like beginner, people to start out with a tarantula that's a little more established than
yeah,
than a tiny sling. And then once you get that experience and stuff, then you can bring the little slings in. But until then, just play it safe.
yeah. No, most definitely. I have to fully agree with you on that.
Mm,
I think starting off in the hobby, it would be so starting off in the hobby, it'd be good to get an adult if you can afford an adult.
right.
Um, Generally thinking it, and if you want something that's going to be around for a long time, you'd be looking at maybe getting an adult female or a
Oh
subadult
yeah.
female.
Yeah.
But you can even start off with juveniles. So
Yeah.
juveniles have definitely developed. They've developed a little bit more. They've become a bit more hardy, but they can still, a bit like my Balfouri at the moment,
Yeah.
they can still act like silly buggers, um,
Right.
and see, but yeah, most definitely. So we've got 7 minutes left.
Right.
Um, so I have a question. What does your partner? What does she think of the hobby?
Oh, she loves it. Um,
Yeah.
I think she loves it more because it brings me so much joy, and she likes that. But she, again, she's learning about it with me as I go, because I'm always learning. I'm constantly learning.
Mhm.
And so I think she really enjoys that aspect, that she gets to learn, and that she's, really enjoying these creatures the same ways that I do. So yeah, she's a fan.
Cool. Cool. And just as we're wrapping up,
Yeah.
is there anything that you would like to plug? So your social medias, things like
Oh,
that, yeah?
sure. Yeah, you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. I believe it's Tarantu_Leah 13. Uh, Pretty sure I have a link tree, like on my Facebook or TikTok and everything. Also, Spider Shop is here in the US as well. I
Yeah.
believe they have separated the coast. So I think they have a Spider Shop East Coast and then Spider Shop West Coast. Um, and they're wonderful from what I hear. They're fantastic. I haven't purchased anything from them yet. But I've purchased from Fear Not Tarantulas, Netbug, uh, Bugs in Cyberspace, and Beasley's Exotics, and I highly recommend them. I also really like, on par with Fear Not Tarantulas, I would say Tom Patterson. If you go to Hardcore Arachnids,
Yeah, he's
that's
just set
his.
that up, hasn't he, recently in the
Yes.
last
Yep.
year or so?
I believe actually last like 5 months or 6 months or so, he just boop, popped up. I have ordered from him, and I mean, he's fantastic. Like I said, he's on par with Fear Not. People in the US will know that Fear Not, I mean, they're kind of number one right now because they just do such a wonderful, amazing job. So yeah, I highly recommend Fear Not and Tom Patterson for sure. Uh, for anything other than tarantulas, I definitely recommend Bugs in Cyberspace,
Yeah.
Micro Wilderness, Substrate. I recommend what's his name? The Bug Guy,
The bio dude or the bug guy?
Bio Dude. That's it.
Yeah.
Love the Bio. I love Bio Dude.
I'm envious that you guys have access to the bio
He's
dude.
still not in the UK yet, huh?
No.
Ah,
Do you guys have do you, Leah, do you have a YouTube channel?
I do.
Or
I do.
you do? Okay. What's your
Yeah,
YouTube channel?
it is Tarantula.
Okay,
So
and that's Tarantu_Leah. So that's
that's it.
TARANTU_Leah. Just for people that are just listening.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, absolutely.
cool. And so my shameless plug now. So I'm Nat. I'm from Somerset Spiders. I'm on everything apart from Twitter under Somerset Spiders. So yeah, come and find me there.
Awesome.
I make silly videos on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen them, Leah, but anyway, they're a bit
Yes, I
silly.
have. You make very good. I love your videos. They're fun. They're a
Oh,
lot of
thank
fun.
you. You're just stroking my ego. Uh, so yeah, thank you for coming on. If you stay around, we'll have a bit of a chat afterwards. And yeah,
Cool.
thank you, Leah. All
Yeah,
right.
thank you, Nat.
Goodbye, everyone.
We'll see you next week.
See you next week.